الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارزقنا حبك وحب نبيك واجعل محبتك ومحبة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم محبة تنجينا بها يوم الدين. اللهم إنا نسألك خيرات وبركات حب نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم يا ربنا إنا نسألك أن تخلقنا بأخلاقه وأن تؤدبنا بأدبه وأن لا تفرق بيننا وبينه حتى تدخلنا مدخله. اللهم احشرنا في زمرته وتحت لوائه وأسقنا من يده الشريفة شربة لا نظمأ بعدها أبدا. اللهم علمنا من سنته ما يصلح دنيانا وأخرانا. اللهم علمنا من سنته ما يصلح دنيانا وأخرانا. اللهم ربنا إنا نسألك ببركات وخيرات هذه الأيام وبركات وخيرات هذا المجلس أن تفك الكرب عنا وعن كل مكروب من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت به عليم. يا ربنا إنا نسألك ببركات ذي الحجة أن تفك الكرب عن إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة وفلسطين. انصرهم نصرا عزيزا مؤزرا. اللهم انصرهم نصرا عزيزا مؤزرا. أمددهم بمددك وانصرهم بجند من جندك. اربط على قلوبهم ثبت أقدامهم. اربط على قلوبهم ثبت أقدامهم. سدد رميهم يا رب العالمين. اللهم سدد رميهم. اللهم اجعل الدائرة على أعدائهم. اللهم اجعل الدائرة على أعدائهم. اللهم عليك بمن ظلمهم. اللهم اهزمهم وزلزلهم. اللهم اهزمهم وزلزلهم وردهم على أعقابهم خائبين خاسئين خزايا نادمين. اللهم يا ربنا عجل بزوال الظالمين ومكن لعبادك الصالحين. اللهم عجل بزوال الظالمين ومكن لعبادك الصالحين يا رب العالمين. أنت حسبنا نعم المولى ونعم الوكيل. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. أما بعد, these days, brothers and sisters, are days that are very blessed. The 10 best days of the year. That's how we see the 10 of Dhul Hijjah. And that's what our Prophet ﷺ teaches us. These are days that are very virtuous. We should take advantage of amal salih and good deeds in these days. And at the top of this, we should be making a lot of dua for the ummah of Muhammad ﷺ. We should be making dua that by the barakah of Hajj and the dua of the Hujjaj, that Allah alleviates our condition and betters the condition of the Muslims in the East and West. Allahumma ameen. Inshallah, we're going to be continuing. Last week we did not have a session because I was a little sick. Today we're going to be continuing with where we left off. The last chapter we went over was chapter on patience. And we read it from our book, the abridgment, Shaykh Yusuf al-Nabhani's abridgment of Riyadh as-Saliheen. And it was under the section of janazah prayers, funeral prayers. He mentioned patience as the last section under that. And that's because he rearranged Riyadh as-Saliheen to fit under themes, under chapters that he put together to try to couple the hadiths and the topics together. Imam Nawawi took a different approach, as we said. The first chapters in Riyadh as-Saliheen and the original text speak to us about the foundations and building blocks of Islam altogether. If you read through the table of contents and the contents in the original text, the first section is on sincerity and intentions. The second one's on repentance. The third one's on patience. The fourth one, which is what we're going to be going over today, is on truthfulness, being genuine, sidq. And we're going to talk about it in a minute. The next one is about muraqabah, watchfulness. Or mindfulness, I should say. Taqwa is God consciousness. Yaqeen and tawakkul, having certainty and trust in Allah. And istiqamah, uprightness. These are all the building blocks of Iman. So this book, is loaded. For today's session, I'm going to ask you to follow along in the original Riyadh as-Saliheen, because I could not find the subsection in this abridgment specifically about truthfulness. It might be there, but I just couldn't eye it. So where are you going to find the original Riyadh as-Saliheen? As I told you before, with your phone, go to sunnah.com you'll see a choice for Riyadh as-Saliheen there. And you could read through the hadiths that I'm going to explain one after the other, inshallah. So the title for today's talk is Chapters on Truthfulness and Mindfulness. Chapters on Truthfulness and Mindfulness. Bab al-Sidq, and then the one after it, Bab al-Muraqabah. So as I said, if you go to sunnah.com, let me have it open in front of me, just like you. You will see an option for Riyadh as-Saliheen, and under that you'll find one of the sections. In the first section, Kitabul Muqaddimat, the book of miscellaneous things, that's what you'll find. Under that, you will find the subsections that I'm referring to. So the first one is on sincerity. If you go forward and scroll down, you will find chapter on repentance. It's all on the same web page. You go through it. The chapter of miscellaneous things is very long. So you just need to keep on scrolling down, and you're going to find this as the fourth chapter. The fourth chapter. Do you have the book? What's the title? 526? Let me check. That might be it. 526. Oh, very good. Jazakallah khair. May Allah give you hasanat. It is in the book. It's lesson 103 in our book. That's very good. This is going to be helpful, inshallah. So if you want to follow in the original Riyadh as-Saliheen from sunnah.com, you can. But now that we found it in our original text, or I should say in our abridgment, you could also use that. So it's page 526. Page 526. Under the book of miscellaneous things, you're just going to need to keep on scrolling down until you see chapter 4. Chapter 4 should come up with you there. So it's a very long web page. Everything is mentioned chapter after chapter. You're going to see until you see the subsection that says chapter 4, that's when the chapter on truthfulness starts. Okay? So then in that case, just keep looking and inshallah you'll find it there. It's a little inconvenient because it's like a 200-page long section because of all the different chapters that are in it. But nonetheless, Babu Sidq. He starts this section off with mentioning to us verses. Now look, the way that I translated it is truthfulness. The other words that we could have used, honesty, or genuineness. Because in fact, what he's talking about in this section relates to all of these things. We're not talking about, being truthful with your words alone. No. Truthfulness with your words is only reflective of the genuine state that you have within. Someone who is fraudulent on the inside will end up lying with their tongue, will end up acting in a deceitful and treacherous way, right? So all of this, the words and the behaviors are reflective of a deeper internal state. It's either very genuine on the inside or it's very fraudulent on the inside. And lying is a reflection of that, and being truthful with your words is also a reflection of that. You guys with me? So we're talking we're talking about something more than just lying or being truthful with your words. The entire state of your being. And that's why, if we look at the verses that he shares and the hadiths, they're reflective of different components of this. And before I go over them, look, the reason why this subject is so foundational is because you cannot find faith and fraudulence coincide. They don't. Faith cannot be sound and pristine if you find fraudulence on the inside. Now, where is this The Prophet ﷺ was once asked this question, can the believer be afraid? He said, yes, the believer could be afraid. Can the believer be a coward? He said, yes, the believer could be a coward. Does the believer lie? He said, no, the believer never lies. So this is just so far removed from the characteristics of faith that the Prophet ﷺ said, there's no way that could coincide with faith. No way. Same, and that's why, and we share this story a lot. There's this companion by the name of Sayyidina Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. And him and his father were on their way to Medina, or were on their way actually to join the Prophet ﷺ in Badr. And they were intercepted by the kuffar of Quraysh. And the kuffar of Quraysh asked them a question, where are you going? And they said, we're going to Medina. Because obviously if they said we're going to the Prophet ﷺ, they're going to be imprisoned or killed. So they said, we're going to Medina. So then they took an oath upon us, as Sayyidina Hudhayfa said, that we will not go join ranks with the Prophet ﷺ, and that will indeed continue on to Medina. So we took the oath. And then we came to the Prophet ﷺ, and we told him what happened. And mind you, in the Battle of Badr, the believers were greatly outnumbered. 3-1. 3-1. So they told the Prophet ﷺ what had happened, and the Prophet ﷺ said, you'll not join us. In Sarifa, get out of here. You're not going to join us in Badr. They needed everybody they could possibly find. So he said, leave, you're not going to join. And then he said golden words that show us how beautiful, genuine, pristine the nature of faith is. He said, نَفِي لَهُمْ بِعَهْدِهِمْ وَنَسْتَعِينُ اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِمْ. We will be loyal to our promise and covenant to them, and will seek assistance from Allah Azza wa Jalla in defeating them. So you see, that genuine nature of Iman is actually what brings a whole lot of goodness to life. That it gives Iman life. It shows us, believer can't be someone who's about treachery and betrayal. Believer is not someone who, has ulterior motives and angles and tries to capitalize on people's well-being and isn't opportunistic. All those ugly things that society shows us and relationships show us, Iman is geared towards removing those from the heart, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about sidq and truthfulness, right? So Babu Sidq, let's look at the verses that he mentions here. The first one he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu attaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. O you who believe, be conscious of Allah, be mindful of Allah, and be with those who are truthful. Wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. And then the second verse he mentions, he only mentions a part of it. He says, and he doesn't mention this in the abridgment actually. So the first verse in the abridgment is the same as the original text. O you who believe, fear Allah. I usually like to say be mindful of Allah instead of fear Allah, because taqwa is much more than an element of fear. Fear is only a component in taqwa. And be with those who are true. The second verse in the original text is وَالصَّادِقِينَ وَالصَّادِقَاتِ. Listing the characteristics of believers, he mentions those truthful, believing men and those truthful, believing women. وَالصَّادِقِينَ وَالصَّادِقَاتِ. And the third verse he shares, فَلَوْ صَدَقُوا اللَّهَ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. Had they been genuine and truthful with Allah, it would have proven better for them. Right? This is speaking about what? This verse is speaking about the hypocrites and the munafiqeen. And that's why fraudulence and faith don't go good together, because fraudulence is synonymous with hypocrisy. And Iman is synonymous with truthfulness and genuineness, right? So he says in this verse, فَلَوْ صَدَقُوا اللَّهَ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. Had they been honest and genuine with Allah, that would have been way better and far more advantageous for them. Speaking in the context that, these hypocrites were always trying to maneuver, always being, dodgy with their emotions, with their motives, with their attitudes. They're never very clear. They're always, they're always maneuvering. They're always trying to seek their best interest. They're always a people on the fence, as the Quran describes. The Quran describes that the hypocrites are these people that are on the fence. When they see the believers suffer a fatal loss, we have nothing to do with these guys. That's their problem, right? When the believers are successful, I was there from day one. I'm a founder. I built this. I worked hard towards that. Right? Right? So they're always on the fence, waiting to see what's going to happen, not putting themselves at risk. Right? So that's the mindset of hypocrisy. Whereas the believer does what's right because it's right, regardless of the risk that he's going to put himself in or the disadvantage he's going to put himself at. I'm going to do what's right because it's right. So you see, subhanAllah, when we look at our iman like this, we can begin to understand how iman makes living a whole lot better. Makes it a whole lot better. You see, like 9/10 of our problems will evaporate if I had the capacity to live my life according to these principles and these values. Most of the problems come about in people's lives when they abandon virtue, when they abandon principles, when they're willing to cross every boundary. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, إن مما أدرك الناس من كلام النبوة الأولى إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت. What has been taught from the very first teachings of prophethood. If you're someone who has no modesty, then do as you may. Meaning nothing's going to hold you back. Nothing's going to stop you. You will cross every red line. Right? So you see, subhanAllah, so much of the tragedy and pain and heartache that people go through in their life is because of these beautiful values of iman not being ingrained within. Right? SubhanAllah. So many levels. Friendships, families, marriages, emotional stability, you name it, everything. Social issues, all of it is traced back to this stuff. Right? So the other thing he adds here in the abridgment, and if you notice, the abridgment actually has two subjects in one. That's why it's not fully our subject. He puts together the subject of truth, sidq, and the subject on lying and false testimony. In the original text, you will find these broken up into different sections, but he pieced them together here. So he says here, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. And pursue not that which of you have no knowledge. Truly the hearing, the sight, and the heart, each of these you will be asked about. This is actually a beautiful verse. This verse teaches me to examine my behaviors at a very, very microscopic level. I want to look at me as a person. When I look at me as a person, am I going to look at a macro level or a micro level? Right? If I'm going to look at a macro level, who am I as a person? I might be tempted to sing my praises. Oh, yeah, I'm a great person. I give charities like this, and I read the Quran like that, and I go to the masjid like that, and hey, I fast every Ramadan. And hey, I'm good to my family. I've done this for my parents, and I've done this. So, at a macro level, I'm great. Yeah, life's good. A'udhu billah. A'udhu billah. Believer doesn't think like this at all. But when I begin to think of myself as at a micro level, you see, this is what this verse is teaching us to do. I need to look at what I'm listening to. What am I listening to? When you hear that, what immediately comes to your mind? What you're listening to? What would you think of? What would you think of? What would you listen to? Someone's immediately going to think music. But that's just one thing. What else could I possibly listen to that is so awful, that is destructive. Listen to people's gossip, that's one thing. Worse, what do you think of that's even worse than that? People listen into things that end up causing a whole lot of problems. Yeah, sure. Whispers of the shaitan. What else? Raise your hand, guys. Raise your hand. Yeah. Oh, eavesdropping. It's another one. It's a massively destructive force that ruins friendships and ruins families. Eavesdropping, right? What you're listening. What am I listening to? What am I looking for? In fact, I should even assess myself, in the way I deal with people, friend and foe. All right. My friends, those who I love, those who are close to me, I may be willing to accept every good thing about them. When it comes to the people I'm not really on good terms with, how do I deal with that? This is what this verse is teaching me to think, what am I listening to when my foe is speaking? Am I choosing to see him or her in all of the worst ways? He's like the shaitan incarnate. He's a shaitan walking on the face of the earth. I hate this person. Everything about this person is dark. How am I operating on a micro level with my ears, with my eyes, with my mind? What are the thoughts that I'm allowing to, what are the thoughts that I'm allowing to settle in my mind? Ya Allah, you think that's some. These are the propellers of ihsan, by the way. When I begin to scrutinize my thoughts, I'm gonna find that there's nothing glamorous to think about me. I know who I am. I know the thoughts that come to my mind. The scholars, they teach us this. They said, if sins had a scent, no one would accept to sit in my presence. Why? He's being introspective. The scholar was saying this. Why? Because if people could hear the thoughts that are going on in my mind, they would have a very disfavorable opinion that comes to them. That's with everybody. Who's perfect? Who's perfect has the best thoughts all the time? Right? No one. And unless you're talking about al-Ma'soom sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You're talking about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But look, the whole lesson from the second verse that he shares is scrutinizing ourselves on a micro level. That's the pathway to being genuine and sincere. Right? There's no way I could be sincere if I'm not going to hold myself accountable. That's why the next chapter in the original as-Saliheen is what? The chapter on muraqabah. Muraqabah. What does muraqabah mean? It means to supervise something. Who am I a supervisor over? The first one I'm a supervisor over is myself. My thoughts, my actions, my behaviors, my attitudes. I'm a supervisor over all these things. And that's why, and we say this a lot, I'll just repeat it just because it's suitable with the context, that Ibn Ata'illah Sakandari, one of the great scholars of the past, he said, the most ignorant of people is the one who abandons the certainty he has of his own self for the assumption that others have of him. أجهل الناس من ترك يقين ما عنده لظن ما عند الناس. I know who I am. بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة. The person's a witness over himself, even if he was to put forth his excuses. Right? And the third verse that he shares in the abridgment here is about false testimony. وَاجْتَنِبُوا قَوْلَ الزُّورِ. False testimony, قول الزور, is this progressed state of fraudulence. You can't get much worse than this. What's false testimony? Someone willing to go into a legal setting, a courtroom, to be a witness to something, and they know they haven't witnessed it. Someone who's reached this point, forget about it. كَبِّرْ عَلَيْهِ أَرْبَعًا. Do 4 takbirat on this person. This person who has reached this point of audacity against the boundaries of Allah, that they're willing to put someone else into the fire, put someone else into harm's way with a false testimony because of some whimsical thing that they have in their mind. That person is in a very, very, very far away state. But it starts somewhere. Where does this start? Look at the very first hadith he shares with us. It's a very beautiful hadith. Look, it teaches us that becoming a genuine person or becoming a fraudulent person are things that are culminations of our choices. It starts on a micro level, those small things that, how do you become a good liar? Let me ask you this. How does someone become a good liar? What do you guys think the answer is? Raise your hand. How does someone become a good liar? You know? By lying a whole lot. That's how you hone your skills. No, I'm not going to call them skills. A'udhu billah. That's how you hone your skills on lying. It starts somewhere, right? Someone who's not used to lying will be a horrible liar. You'll be able to tell from their mannerisms, their face gestures. They'll start sweating, stuttering, looking here and there. You will immediately know. But someone who has this pathological, issue with lying, is a pathological liar. This person has only become that because they've led a lifestyle of lying, right? Guys, if you want to talk, go. Jazakallah khair. The first hadith, عن ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه. Look at this hadith. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الصدق يهدي إلى البر وإن البر يهدي إلى الجنة وإن الرجل ليصدق حتى يكتب عند الله صديقا وإن الكذب يهدي إلى الفجور وإن الفجور يهدي إلى النار وإن الرجل ليكذب حتى يكتب عند الله كذابا. Right? Prophet ﷺ, he says, as Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the great companions of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said, truthfulness, sidq, leads to piety. And piety leads to Jannah. A man should be truthful until he's written down with Allah as a truthful person. Lying leads to deviance, and deviance leads to the fire. A man will lie until he's written down with Allah as a liar. Right? There are, a few critical takeaways from this hadith. One of these critical takeaways is what I just emphasized. These are behavioral things. They start out small, and then they become big, right? That's why the believer doesn't even allow himself to lie, even what they call a white lie. The small things, right? Something that's insignificant, something that's not really consequential, right? I'm not gonna it's not like I burned the house down. I just told someone I was somewhere where I really wasn't. Or I just told someone I said something when I didn't, right? A small thing, something that's trivial. It's not gonna harm me, it's not gonna harm them. I'm not gonna allow myself to do that. Yeah, there are certain situations, that's different. Those exceptions, that's different. But that quote-unquote white lie that doesn't cause much harm, I don't allow myself to embrace that in any way. In fact, the more sidq and truthfulness becomes in my heart, the stronger my iman will become. That's why, one of the strongest examples of iman in the ummah is who? Who are the two individuals you associate this beautiful virtue with? Sidq, truthfulness. Tell me, who are the two? Right? Yeah? Of course, after the Prophet ﷺ, from this ummah. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abu Bakr. These are the two right hands of the Prophet. The fundamental feature that sets them apart from everyone else is their extreme level of truthfulness and honesty. Right? Abu Bakr, he became a Siddiq, right? A Siddiq is this form of emphasis of truth, right? Siddiq is someone who is, prolifically truthful, genuine, committed, complete. He believed the Prophet ﷺ in everything. No doubt, not an ounce of doubt in the heart of Abu Bakr. And then comes Umar. Umar, same exact thing. Umar, radiallahu anhu, was so on truth that the Prophet ﷺ said, whenever the devil sees you walking down a path, he walks down another one. ما رآك الشيطان سالكا فجا إلا سلك فجا غير فجك. Why? Because Sayyidina Umar was a person of supreme truth. Right? He was a person who was a great proponent of truth in everything in life. He's someone who embraced truth even when it was against his own self. Right? It's an amazing example. Both of them, subhanAllah, both of them are emblems of truth. So this is the first lesson from this hadith. It starts off small, and then it builds up after that, for better or for worse. Right? The other thing that this hadith teaches us is the reward of a good deed is another good deed, and the reward of a bad deed is another bad deed. The scholars, they teach us this in the consequences of actions. They say that min jaza'il hasanati hasanatun mithluha, right? Wa min jaza'il sayyiati sayyiatun mithluha, right? When when the person endeavors wrongful deeds, it becomes easier for them and easier and easier. One bad deed leads to another one, until it becomes a lifestyle. One good deed, Allah blesses this person who does one act of goodness with another act of goodness, and it becomes easier and easier to do good things, right? These are gifts that Allah gives. You do one good deed, it'll open for you this door to more good deeds. You do one bad deed, it'll open up this door to other bad deeds. And life proves this absolutely true. How many times has a person had to say 10 lies to cover up the first lie that he started off with? And how many times has it become a slippery slope, and this person ended up finding themselves in this deep dark hole because of something that started and he didn't know how to stop it, right? So this is what this hadith teaches us. Beautiful wisdoms. And he teaches us that in the commentary, the wisdoms of the hadith, he shares these things, right? That's the first hadith. What's the next hadith that he shares with us? So in the abridged Riyadh as-Saliheen, he skips over one hadith. He skips over, and then he goes to the third hadith in the section. The second hadith in the original says this. It's a very important hadith. It's a very foundational hadith. We don't have time to explain it now. It's one of the 40 Riyadh as-Saliheen hadiths. It's short though. This hadith is on the account of Al-Hasan ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that he heard the Prophet ﷺ say, حفظت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك فإن الصدق طمأنينة والكذب ريبة. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he says, leave that which causes you doubt for that which doesn't cause you doubt. And he commented, sidq, truthfulness, leads to a sense of tranquility. And lying leads to a sense of doubt. These are things, right? So that's why they actually say this another way. Al-haqqu ablaj wal-batilu lajlaj. They say, Al-haqqu ablaj, truth is pristine and clear, right? It's unambiguous. And al-kadhib lajlaj, it causes insecurities, right? You know, when I'm someone who's driven by ulterior motives, I'm going to think other people are driven by ulterior motives too. When I'm someone who lies, I'm going to think other people are lying too. When I'm someone who, doubts others, right? Or I'm going to find that spills over to everything else about me. I'm going to doubt Allah, doubt myself, and it's endless, right? So it causes insecurity. It weakens the soul. In fact, one of the greatest contributors to spiritual grit, what makes you very spiritually firm? When you're a person of sidq. If I'm doing all the right things and I'm committed to that, even when it, makes me, even when it's, it hurts my ego, I'm going to find ultimately it's going to cause this great peace of mind, right? Everyone's in that situation at one point or another. I need to make a decision. I realized I was wrong in a situation, and I feel bad about it, and there's these two thoughts that are pulling at me. Let me just bury it and move on, and the heck with anything. Or let me just own up to it and apologize and fix it, right? It's very easy for the nafs to pull me to take the first choice. Why? Because it's easier on my ego. I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to have to explain and apologize and fix it. And this is But someone who's honest, that takes a lot of courage, right? That's why they say that there are mothers of virtues. There's ummahat al-akhlaq, right? One of the mothers of virtues is is sidq, honesty. What do I mean mothers of virtues? Like everything that's virtuous could be traced back to it, right? Sidq is one of those four mother of all virtues, as they refer to it. Ummahatul akhlaqi arba', right? There are four mothers of virtues, right? And one of them is sidq, honesty, and another one is iffa, chastity, right? And another one is shaja'a, courage, and another one is hikmah, wisdom. And all of the things that you find mentioned in Islam relating to character and virtue could be traced back to one of these four. Shaja'a itself could be traced back to sidq. There's no way that you're a person of courage, that you could be a person of courage without being truthful. Because what good is courage on the outside if I'm not courageous with my own nafs on the inside, right? So that's something to think about. So he says, فَإِنَّ الصِّدْقَ الطُّمَأْنِينَ وَالْكَذِبْ رِيبَةٌ. Lying always causes these insecurities. Being genuine causes this confidence, this spiritual confidence. Now, of course, that doesn't mean like, have you ever seen a confident liar, so to say? Someone could appear to be confident, because again, they're charismatic and they got used to it, and especially when you look at politics or business and trade, you will find people with the biggest egos in the world, who are the biggest liars in the world, yet they're so good at selling the lie, they're good salesmen, right? Can't be a good politician without being a good salesman, right? But anyway, I just digressed right now. To be honest, you can't be a good politician, unfortunately, with politics. Now, let me rephrase, right? Because we're in a very political climate. Let me rephrase that. In a toxic political climate that is cornered on opportunism and false allegiances, unfortunately, the only way you could get ahead is by being a good liar, a good salesman. I need to pitch it so I get more votes, right? Unfortunately, it's all about false allegiances. But anyway, if I'm going to be honest, then I'm not going to be the fan favorite. If I'm going to be honest, right, with all my beliefs and all of my attitudes towards things, guess what? I'm not going to be the fan favorite. There's no way. Because everyone's going to find a reason to hold a grudge against me. Oh, he said that. I didn't like that he said that. He did that. I don't know. Even though maybe that statement that was said that's not really popular, or that action that was done that's not really popular, is what needed to be done, right? That's why the Quran says to us, اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Adl, justice, is also strongly linked with being genuine and honest, right? Be just. It is closer to taqwa, even if it won't get you a lot of support, right? So that's what this hadith, دع ما يريبك, it applies to so many things. In a class on 40 Nawawi hadiths, I would take a full class just on this one hadith. Let's go to the next one that he mentions here. Look, he mentions this on the bottom of 527. He says, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. The top of 527. عن أبي سفيان رضي الله تعالى عنه في حديثه الطويل في قصة هرقل قال هرقل فماذا يأمركم يعني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أبو سفيان قلت يقول اعبدوا الله وحده ولا تشركوا به شيئا واتركوا ما يقول آباؤكم ويأمرنا بالصلاة والصدق والعفاف والصلة. Right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this hadith right now. This hadith is narrated by one of the companions. His name is Abu Sufyan. When he narrates this hadith, when this event happened, he wasn't Muslim yet. He was actually one of the leaders of Quraysh, one of the heads of disbelief. What happened? Heraclius, the head of the Byzantine Empire at the time, asked for this, these leaders from Quraysh who were in Greater Syria, visiting to come into his hall because he wanted to ask about this man in Arabia who's claiming to be a prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this Heraclius, again, even though he was not a believer, he was a smart leader. You know what he did? He made Abu Sufyan stand in the front, and he made all of the people with him in the caravan that came from Quraysh behind him. Right? They could see him, he can't see them. And then he asked him a series of questions. And Abu Sufyan, again, he even mentions this when he's narrating the hadith. He said, and this shows you that there's no real allegiances between frauds, between people of illicit behavior and practices. There's no real allegiances. Even if they'll look, they're in a gang, they'll make themselves look like friends, right? They're partners in crime. They're not really partners, right? They'll sell each other out at the first opportunity, right? And that's what happens when subhanAllah, when you have a brotherhood or a sisterhood that's really for the sake of Allah, it takes a different level than having a friendship that is for any material gain. Right? You have a friendship that's because of a job. Guess what's going to happen once you lose that job? 9 times out of 10, those people who are your friends at that job are going to drop you. They're going to act like they didn't even know you. Right? You got in trouble at work? That's your problem. I have nothing to do with you. I need this job. I need to pay my bills. Right? I don't have anything to do with you. Don't come to me. I can't help you. Right? Same thing with other situations. Right? When it's not for Allah, wallahi, it's short-lived. Wallahi, it's not going to be beautiful. Sometimes, subhanAllah, and I'm not just saying, it's not like every relationship that you have with a Muslim is for Allah, right? That's not always the case, right? Unfortunately. But if it's very sincere and it's truly for Allah, you're going to find that it endures. Even with business, you find this a lot. You find, all right, I find someone give me an extra buck. Sometimes the people would be willing to sell the person and his whole family, right? Just to get that extra buck. I don't care. I want more money. I need more money. I don't care. I made an agreement. I made a commitment. I'm in a partnership. I will sell any person out. SubhanAllah, a'udhu billah, like the stories of life even tell us about things that are even more nefarious. Sometimes family members will sell each other out for the purpose of money. It's the most disgusting thing to imagine. Like a brother with a brother, or a sister with a sister, or something like that, a sibling with each other. That shouldn't. It's like it's so aberrant and wrong. You think it won't happen, but it does. Unfortunately, it does. Again, when something is sincerely for Allah, it's beautiful. When it's for other things, it's going to be short-lived. So anyway, Abu Sufyan is in the hot seat, and his friends are behind him, and he's thinking, and he's the narrator of this hadith. He tells us, I could not say for certain that they won't give me up. So I was worried that I'm going to lie to Heraclius, and one of them is going to raise his hand and say he's lying, and I'm going to be done for. I'm going to be thrown in prison or worse. Right? That's what he was. So he had to give honest answers. So he gave honest answers about the Prophet ﷺ. It's a long hadith in Bukhari. Part of that hadith, he describes who the Prophet was. Heraclius said, what does he order you to do? Meaning the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Sufyan replied, he says, worship Allah alone, do not associate anything with Him, and abandon what your ancestors said. He commands us to observe prayer, right? That's your direct link with Allah. Truthfulness, sidq, and abstinence, afaf, and to maintain ties of kinship. These last 3 all relate to our dealings with people. This is part and parcel the message of the Prophet ﷺ. There is no way, again, like, look, anyone who really studies their Islam will realize that there's no opportunity for me to divorce my behaviors from my beliefs. Just doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. There's no way. I'm going to cut off ties of kin, and I'm going to have a sibling or an uncle or a mother or a father that I don't talk to for months on end, and I'm going to claim that I am a great believer. May Allah forgive us. May Allah forgive us. If it's out of negligence, it's one thing. If it's out of qati'ah and cutting off ties of kin, it's an entirely other thing. May Allah not make us of those people who would behave in such ways, right? Sidq, same thing. This is something behavioral. That this leaves no room to act like one person, like a person here, right? I look the look and I talk the talk, but I don't walk the walk, right? I look like a very religious person, quote unquote, whatever that means. But once I go out there, I lie, I steal, I gossip, and I take advantage of others. Can that work? That could only work if I'm someone who's utterly divorced from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So this is what this beautiful hadith, it teaches us. It's an illustration of what the message of the Prophet ﷺ is all about. That's what he tells you in the wisdom of this hadith, right? So this hadith teaches us how being genuine is truly this massively foundational thing in Islam altogether, right? So that's the third hadith he shares. I guess I could take a pause for a moment if anyone has a comment or question. And by the way, you see there's a Slido here. I'll open it up right now just to see if there's any questions coming in as we're giving the talk. You could send questions to there using the QR code. If anyone has questions, you can ask. Anyone has any direct questions? Go ahead. Oh, that's a big subject. So there are situations where Islam allows us to quote unquote lie if it'll avert a bigger harm. So among these lies would be to reconcile between two parties. I call it reverse namima. You know what namima is? Namima is when you gossip in a way that divides between people, right? You're ruining relationships. So reverse namima is, I'm going to go to person A, and person A and person B are not on good terms, right? Because an incident happened. I'm person C. I'm going to come to person A and I'm going to tell him, oh, person B, by the way, I was with him the other day and he was saying really nice things about you. Man, that brother loves you. And he actually didn't say anything. But you know why I'm saying that? I want to try to bring their hearts together. And I go to person person B, and I say, oh, by the way, I was spending time with person A the other day, and they have a lot of respect for you. I'm honest with you, he really values your friendship. And the guy didn't even say a single thing about him. But instead of being this little devil, I'm being this person who's actually bridging gaps between people. So it's one of those situations where it's okay to lie. Another situation it's okay to lie is, if it's going to lead to some harm to you. إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنُّ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Like if you're being compelled to disbelieve, and if you don't say what you're being compelled to do or compelled to say, they're going to kill you, right? So this happened to the companions in the early days of Islam. Ammar ibn Yasir, the Prophet ﷺ said, if they were to come back, then go back again. Say the words of disbelief, even if you don't really mean it, right? And there's other situations, but those are the exceptions, right? You want to say something? Yes? Yeah, I can't, how can I force people to forgive? So the question is, if you choose to be honest and then seek this person's forgiveness, well, look, wisdom needs to be calculated or factored in, I guess you could say. So being honest does not mean be a fool, right? Being honest doesn't mean be a fool. Like some people, that's what they think. I'm just brutally honest, right? I don't care, how people take it or, how they did. I'm just going to be brutally honest, right? I'm going to speak my mind and no one's going to make me stop, right? No. Okay, fine. You're an honest person, I agree. But besides being an honest person, you're a buffoon, right? Not you. I'm saying like the person, they're two separate things, right? So If you took all calculations in mind to make sure that it doesn't lead to any problems, and you were honest and you presented something that you needed to present the way you presented it to them, then it's not you can't compel people to forgive you, right? Or forget about it. But you can be mindful enough to share with them the truths in a way that they could digest, right? So, Jazakallah khair for the question, and I hope people keep this in mind. Being honest doesn't mean being obnoxious, right? They're two completely separate issues. So, honesty needs wisdom, and wisdom is all about honesty. Wisdom is all about honesty, right? But how to deliver, that's what we're talking about, right? So, Jazakallah khair. Any third thing before I continue from the brother side? Anything? Anyone have a comment or question? Any comment or question? No? Okay, let's continue on. So he says here, in the next hadith, actually, subhanAllah, the next hadith relates nicely to what we were just talking about. The next hadith at the bottom of 527 says, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كفى بالمرء كذبا أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. Right? Are you a person who has a filter? Is having a filter being a liar? Of course not, right? No, having a filter is good, right? Am I just going to share everything with everyone without question, without any thought or deliberation? No, that's not what it means to be honest, right? That could be very reckless. So the Prophet ﷺ says here, it is enough of a lie for a man to talk about everything he hears. Why? Because most of what he probably hears is hearsay, or half-truths, or unverified things. This happens all the time in our lives. That's why you could see this one subject probably relates to most relationship or struggles that we go through in our lives. Look at how many problems could possibly be resolved if this one hadith was enacted in our lives. It is enough of a lie for a man to talk about everything he hears. What does this clarify? It clarifies the false notion that, saying everything as it was said to you means that you're honest, or means that you're genuine, or means that, you don't keep anything in. No, but being someone who uses discretion is... it does not conflict with being truthful at all, right? What does that mean? If I know that if I share the whole truth as it is with person X, I will cause a whole lot of damage. Is it of wisdom for me to share the whole truth with person X the way it happened? No, don't do that. A'udhu billah. Because of this false understanding of honesty, I could end up becoming a person who ruins relationships. Namam, right? And sometimes people would, wrongfully fall into namima, right? Maybe perhaps I didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, I want to ruin person A and person B's relationship to its core. Maybe I didn't have that intention. But because of silly behaviors, I shared things between these two individuals that ended up causing a whole lot of hurt and damage. Don't do that. And sometimes it's coming from a whole lot of hearsay and unverified things. A lot of things. That's why, the Quran summarizes this. You know how it summarizes it? لا خير في كثير من نجواهم. There's no goodness in much of their private conversations. إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس. Right? Except someone who commands with charity, or some act of goodness, or rectifying between people. That's why, I want to go back to that first verse that we recited. Very beginning of the section. O you who believe, fear Allah and be with those who are true. You see that? كونوا مع الصادقين. Not كونوا من الصادقين. كونوا مع الصادقين. I need to choose my company very thoughtfully. I need to choose my company very, very thoughtfully. If I surround myself with people who most of what they say is a whole bunch of toxic hot air, and guess what? It's going to exhaust me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I need to choose my company. Like, who am I surrounding am I surrounding myself with someone who's going to spiritually uplift me and inspire me to do all the right things? That's why Allah says, "Kunu ma'as sadiqeen." Because when I'm around people who are very genuine, very sincere, very truthful, then guess what? It's going to push me to be sincere and genuine. But when I'm around people who are always, most of their talks are about bad assumptions, gossip, slander, lying, deceit, then guess what? All that stuff is going to take a toll on my spiritual state. Big time. Big time. That's what we learn from that ayah, and that's what we learn from this hadith. Right? So the next hadith that he shares here, look, I'll share with you one from the original text that's not in the abridgment. This hadith, it says this. This companion narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, "من سأل الله تعالى الشهادة بصدق بلغه الله منازل الشهداء وإن مات على فراشه." This is a beautiful hadith. Whoever asks Allah for martyrdom sincerely, Allah will give him the status of the martyrs even if he was to die on his own deathbed. Even if he was to die a normal, natural death. Why is this significant? وَإِن مَاتَ عَلَى فِرَاشِهِ. It shows us how powerful and impactful being genuine and sincere really is. It means that, sometimes, is sincerity enough? Like, if I was to pose to you the question like that, is sincerity enough? What would your answer be? What would your answer be? Yes? No. No, right? Well, everything we said is, I would say this. The question needs to be restated. Because there's no way that you have true sincerity on the inside if it's not reflected in your behaviors on the outside. The question needs to be restated. But if I was to answer it as is sincerity in your heart enough? No, your actions need to prove it. Your statements need to prove it, right? But if I was to, say it a different way, how impactful can your intentions and your sincerity alone be on your status by Allah? Massively impactful. This hadith shows us. This person didn't even die as a martyr. He died on his own deathbed, but Allah will raise him up because he was such a sincere, genuine person. We know that hadith, the person, إِذَا مَرِضَ الْعَبْدُ أَوْ سَافَرْ كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَهُ مِنَ الْأَجْرِ مَا كَانَ صَحِيحًا مُقِيمًا. If someone was to get sick, right? We have someone who is always in the masjid, but then he gets this terminal illness and he can't come to the masjid anymore. And he really wants to go, and he used to go, right? Will Allah write for him the ajr? Yes, Allah will write for him all the ajr. Right? This person travels and he's no longer able to go to the masjid like he would have, or he's no longer able to do certain behaviors that he would have otherwise done. Allah will write for him the ajr. That's how powerful sincerity is. That's how powerful being genuine is. Right? Man sa'ala Allah ta'ala shahada b'sidq. So that's why, be very careful about what you voice to Allah. If you're sincere, your sincerity is going to be put to the test. Look at this. There's a verse about the munafiqeen. You know what it says? وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَاهَدَ اللَّهِ لَإِنْ آتَانَا مِنْ فَضْلِهِ لَنَصَّدَّقَنَّ. There are those who, they made this promise, right? If Allah gives us of His fadl, then I'm gonna be very charitable, right? Like that person who, if Allah gives me $1 million, I'm going to do so much good with it. I'm going to build this and spend on that and give that. And then the verse says, when Allah gave them of His fadl and they were put to the test, now you have, what are you going to do? they were stingy with it. Now they were put to the test, right? So be very mindful of what you state and what you voice, because your sincerity will be put to the test, right? So if I'm true and genuine, Allah will answer. Allah will open doors. Allah will facilitate. That's the blessings of being truthful. The blessings of being truthful is the truthful ones don't have to worry. Allah's going to take care of them, right? That's my role in this, right? If I'm someone who takes it upon himself to cross the boundaries of virtue, then Allah's going to leave me to my actions. Go ahead. You want it on your shoulders? Go ahead, take it. But if I'm someone who says, you know what? No. I'm going to do all the right things because I want Allah's pleasure and I know Allah will take care of me. Right? You know, the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith that someone, man taraka shay'an lillahi, the wording of the hadith is actually like this: إِنَّكَ لَن تَدَعْ شَيْئًا لِلَّهِ إِلَّا بَدَّلَكَ اللَّهُ مَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْهُ. Right? The hadith says, what does it say? Whenever you abandon something for the sake of Allah, Allah will replace it for something that is far better for you. Right? That's what it means to be genuine. Allah takes care of genuine, sincere people, even if they seem as though they're at a disadvantage in their dunya. Right? Allah will take care of them. So here, let's go to the next hadith. The next hadith tells us that not all lying is the same. All right? The hadith is the hadith is on the top of 528. It says, عن سمرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من حدث عني بحديث يرى أنه كذب فهو أحد الكاذبين. Right? Prophet ﷺ says, anyone who relates a saying from me which he considers to be a lie is one of the liars. Right? So this hadith is telling us not all lies are the same. When, really, not all lies are the same? Of course. When you're lying about Allah and His Prophet, it becomes 10 times worse. When you're lying in the presence of, when you're lying affects the rights of others, it becomes 10 times worse. When your lying breaches the sanctity of something in the deen, it becomes 10 times worse. Right? So not all lying is the same. That's the worst type of lie, when you lie about your deen. Right? So that's why the people of the book were told in the Quran, as the Quran said, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ لَتُبَيِّنُنَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَكْتُمُونَهُ. Allah took a covenant on those who have scripture. You will clarify it to people, you won't lie about it. Right? You will not conceal it. Right? The next hadith, let's go get another dose from the next hadith. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ألا أنبئكم بأكبر الكبائر. Prophet ﷺ said, you want to know shall I inform you of the greatest of the major sins? They said, بلى يا رسول الله. So he said, الإشراك بالله وعقوق الوالدين وكان متكئا فجلس فقال ألا وقول الزور وشهادة الزور فما زال يكررها حتى قلنا ليته سكت. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, the biggest sins are associating others with Allah and disobedience to your parents. He was reclining, then he sat up and said, indeed, and telling lies and giving false testimony. He kept repeating them until we said, if only he would be quiet. Meaning that he emphasized these things so much. It's one of the most repulsive things a person could possibly do. Say something that gives him the rights that don't belong to him because of a false testimony that he gave, right? And it's, it's actually one of the hallmarks of hypocrisy. The Prophet ﷺ, next hadith, actually tells us about the 4 characteristics of hypocrisy. Prophet ﷺ says, أربع من كن فيه كان منافقا خالصا ومن كانت فيه خصلة منهن كانت فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعها. Prophet ﷺ said, if anyone has these 4 characteristics, he's a pure hypocrite. And if anyone has one of them, he has an aspect of hypocrisy until he gives it up. And then he says, whenever he's trusted, he betrays his trust. Whenever he speaks, he lies. Whenever he makes an agreement, he breaks it. And whenever he quarrels, he speaks falsely. وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرَ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Look at all this. Each of these characteristics relates to fraudulence. Each one of them, could be traced back to this person being a disingenuous person. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Right? So that, that's exactly what hypocrisy is all about. That's pretty much the section that we have in the abridgment. And there's a few other hadiths that he mentions in the original text. But this gives you a heavy dose of it. A really good dose of, truthfulness, being genuine, lying, deceit, treachery, all of that stuff, and how they really affect our lives. This is the guidance that we have from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on each of these issues. As I told you before, when you read these sections, it's really important to link the verses with the hadiths, right? It's really important to link the verses with the hadith. And the links are clear. If you look at the 3 verses I shared with you again, O you who believe, be mindful of Allah and be with the truthful. We explained why being with the truthful is so critical to becoming a truthful person. And then وَالصَّادِقِينَ وَالصَّادِقَاتِ, the fundamental characteristic of Iman is being truthful, genuine, honest. And then فَلَوْ صَدَقُوا اللَّهَ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. There's no way that a person who's true and genuine and honest will be, their efforts will be in vain. So that's the section for today. Inshallah, I'm going to look through some of the questions here and then I'll take some more direct questions after that. So the first question that's been voted up here: what if your siblings do haram? Can you cut ties or stay away as much as possible? What do you advise? So look, there's no clear-cut answer to give for this type of situation. What the person's describing here needs a conversation. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a journey learning to be willing to have a conversation, right? Most people don't want to talk about their personal stuff with people. It takes a lot of courage to sit down and to talk with people about your personal stuff. I can't tell you how many people, end up falling into so much damage and hurt because they're not ready to talk about something with someone, and they need to talk about something with somebody. You need advice, you need feedback sometimes. So what if your siblings do haram? Well, have you addressed it in any meaningful way? Well, how does this haram affect you? Well, when does this haram affect you? Is it at every interaction? Is it under certain circumstances? Is there any method of intervention that could possibly work? If the answer to and sometimes someone might have answered no with all of these things already in their mind, and sometimes we rush to the no because we don't want to figure things out. These are not easy things to do. You can't just cut off a sibling or a mother or a father or a family. It's not an easy thing, right? This should be last resort, and it should be mindfully done, very thoughtful. You really need to have a conversation with someone who could give you good advice about the specifics of your circumstance before you take any drastic action. So that's my advice to this person. You could limit it if, after everything's all said and done, whichever way you twist it or turn it, this person's presence in my life is very toxic, then maybe perhaps I could limit it. I can find ways to limit it. I'm not going to quickly cut off my sibling just because I feel like they're toxic. No, there's certain points of interaction. Maybe I could perhaps do something meaningful without getting affected by what they do. But there's more to say about that. But talk to people. Learn to have these conversations. Seek advice. It takes a lot of courage to seek advice. Seek advice. There's no one too big. Wallahi, there's no one too big to seek advice about personal things in their life. Everyone who has any ounce of sincerity in their heart will do it, right? So that's the first one that came up over there. Here's another one. Muraqabah. The Prophet ﷺ used to retreat to become mindful of Allah. Outside of prayer, what mindfulness practices are in the Sunnah, meditating and etc. The Prophet ﷺ, the whole point of i'tikaf is to become more mindful, is to clear your mind through worship, clear your mind through worship. That's what i'tikaf is all about. So that the Prophet ﷺ would go into khulwa and he would disconnect from the normal hustle and bustle of life to gain this sense of mindfulness in Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's salah is that opportunity too, by the way. You don't need to do, sometimes the answer is so obvious, but it doesn't satiate me, right? I want something more. Okay, don't tell me just salah. Well, just salah? Well, I want something more than salah. Wallahi, if we knew what salah was, I'd understand that salah is everything, right? Salah is the best form of quote-unquote meditation. If I knew how to maximize benefit from salah, I won't need anything else, right? So sometimes the easy answer is actually the most effective one. And that's the next question over there. Does anyone have any direct questions they'd like to ask before I continue with the Slido? Any direct questions? You're raising your hand? No? Okay, go ahead. The 4? It's in the book. It's the hadith on page 529, top of 529. You're welcome. All right. So here's another one. We already really addressed this. Are there any instances where it's permissible to lie? We already addressed that one. What is the difference between being right and being kind? Being right and being kind. I don't know what you mean by the question. I think I know what you mean, but I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to say. So being kind and compassionate is one thing. Being right is if you don't want to be someone who's abrasive and always trying to prove you're right, and you want to be kind in doing that, that's. But I don't entirely get what you're trying to say. Is lying when joking aloud? This is a good one. Is lying when joking aloud? It is something that is debased. It's lowly, right? I know it's common. I know the whole that they say أعذب الشعر أكذبه, right? Even when you're trying to trigger fantasy, the greatest lie is the greatest fantasy, right? You need to twist truths, twist words, exaggerate things. All of the whole comedy industry is based on exaggerations, right? I need to exaggerate to make people laugh, right? The whole comedy industry is based on that. But I need to be very mindful. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, woe to one who lies to trigger laughter in people. لِيُضْحِكَ بِهِ الْقَوْمِ وَيْلٌ لَهُ وَيْلٌ لَهُ. Prophet ﷺ says, woe to him. The one who lies just to make people laugh. So if it's difficult because everything in our society pushes you to behave like this, try to break out of it. Try to only engage in the type of laughter that's based on truthfulness, honesty. It's really difficult. But is lying when joking allowed? The answer is no. The answer, it's not allowed. And may Allah help us become better people. And may Allah help us not be influenced by the toxic things in our society. Allahumma ameen. And we have 5 minutes left till salah. And I know it's late. It's 10:10. So we're going to stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Next Tuesday, we're still going to be in the days of Eid. Eid's on Sunday. So the next Tuesday is the 3rd day of Eid. Or it's from the Ayam al-Tashriq, the 2nd day of Ayam al-Tashriq. So we're not going to be having class next Tuesday. We will have class the Tuesday after that, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. And inshallah we'll have adhan now and then salah. Assalamu alaikum. If you guys could